Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to World Economy. My name is Blyden Ukem. On World Economy today, global energy flows at risk in the Strait of Hormuz. We begin a conversation around the Strait of Hormuz this afternoon. Roughly one-fifth of the world's oil consumption and LNG trade passes through the Strait of Hormuz, and making it one of the most critical energy corridors on the planet. The narrow waterway between Iran and Oman connects the Persian Gulf to global market, serving as a vital route for oil and gas exports from major producers including Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE and Qatar. Tensions involving Iran have periodically raised concerns about disruption to traffic through the strait, which could affect global energy markets. This data highlights what moves through the Strait of Hormuz each day, from oil tankers and LNG carriers to a share of global energy consumption dependent on the routes. Data comes from Lloyd's List and the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA. Let's look at a chart indicating global energy flows at risk in the Strait of Hormuz. According to the chart, world cargo of vessels have stood at 100 in a matter of the time and in a matter of a year, and global oil consumption via Hormuz about 20%, global seaborne oil trade via Hormuz about 27%, and global LNG trade via the Hormuz Strait at 20%, and crude and condensate sent to Asia 89%, and on and on and on. Roughly 100 cargo carrying vessels pass through the strait on an average day in 2026. Around 60 to 70% of these vessels are oil tankers and gas carriers, reflecting the region's dominant role in global energy exports. In fact, about 20% of global oil consumption moves through the Strait of Hormuz. In terms of maritime trade, the passage accounts for roughly 27% of all seaborne oil shipments worldwide. LNG trade also relies on the straits. The Strait of Hormuz is not only critical for oil. Around 20% of global liquefied natural gas LNG trade also travels through this corridor. Major LNG exporters such as Qatar rely heavily on the strait to ship natural gas to global markets. As demand for LNG rises, especially in Asia and Europe, the shipping route becomes even more important for energy security. Asia is the region most dependent on energy flows through the Strait of Hormuz. The region's heavy reliance reflects its large energy demand and limited domestic oil and gas resources. About 89% of crude oil and condensate passing through the strait is shipped to Asian market. Similarly, roughly 83% of LNG exports traveling through the corridor are destined for Asia. Major importers include China, India, Japan, and South Korea. By contrast, the United States is far less reliant on the routes. Only about 7% of U.S. crude imports come through the strait, and roughly 2% of U.S. petroleum liquids consumption depend on these flows. As here regarding passages of oil, the world's oil choke point would be next. Oil markets rely on a handful of narrow maritime passengers to keep supply flowing. These oil supply choke points are critical arteries of global energy system, moving tens of millions of barrels per day. The map we're about to show indicates the world's most important oil transit choke points and a share of global maritime oil trades. The data comes from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA. It highlights the volume of crude and petroleum liquids that pass through key maritime choke points in the first half of 2025, giving us an indication of what's happening right now, measured in million barrels per day, and their share of total world maritime oil trade. In total, about 73 million barrels per day of oil are moved through major maritime choke points, representing the majority of globally traded seaborne oil. The Strait of Malacca is the busiest oil corridor. Let's talk about the Straits of Malacca. The Strait of Malacca between Malaysia and Indonesia is the world's busiest oil choke point. Roughly 23.2 million barrels per day are flowed through this narrow channel in the first half of 2025, accounting for about 29.1% of global maritime oil trade. Let's look at a chart indicating the world's oil choke points. The chart. The Strait of Malacca connects the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea, making it a crucial route for oil shipment to China, Japan, South Korea. A narrow width and heavy traffic make it vulnerable to congestion and geopolitical tensions. The Strait of Hormuz also a critical energy artery, as we talked about earlier. The Strait of Hormuz, located between Oman and Iran, handled about 20.9 million barrels per day in the first half of 2025, roughly one-fifth of global oil consumption. It connects the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea, and is deep and wide, enough to accommodate the world's largest crude oil tankers. Approximately 84% of crude oil moved through Hormuz is destined for Asian markets, including China, India, Japan, and South Korea. Because so much Gulf production depends on this route, any disruption can send shockwaves through global oil prices, as we're seeing right now. Other key choke points across the globe. Beyond Malacca and Hormuz, several other passengers play important roles in global oil flows. The Suez Canal and the Suez pipeline transported about 4.9 million barrels per day, linking the Red Sea to the Mediterranean. Nearby, the Bab el-Mandab carried roughly 4.2 million barrels per day, connecting the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. In Europe, the Nene Strait and Turkey Strait serve as key gateways for Russian and Caspian oil exports, moving about 4.9 million and 3.7 million barrels per day, respectively. Meanwhile, the Panama Canal handled roughly 2.3 million barrels per day, while longer alternative routes, such as the Cape of Good Hope, carried about 9.1 million barrels per day as tankers travel between the Atlantic and Indian Ocean. And now let's look at the countries adding the most global GDP, looking at a period of 2026 to 2030 as estimated. Over the next 5 years, nearly half of all projected global GDP growth is expected to come from just 3 countries: China, the United States, and India. While nearly every economy is projected to expand through 2030, the bulk of new output will be concentrated among a small group of heavyweight nations. This ranking looks at which nations are expected to add the most to global GDP between 2026 and 2030, based on IMF World Economic Outlook, the projection. Importantly, these figures reflect nominal GDP increases in US dollars and are not in real terms, that is adjusted for inflation. China and the US lead in absolute growth. China ranks first in total GDP added, projected to expand by $5.7 trillion between 2026 and 2030. The United States follows closely behind at $5 trillion. Despite slower percentage growth compared to emerging markets, the sheer size means even modest expansion translates into massive dollar gains. Let's look at the chart indicating countries adding the most to global GDP, looking at a period of 2026 to 2030. The charts. At number 1 is China, and you can see the GDP added within the period as projected, not estimated, at $5,686.2 billion dollars for China, and moving even further for United States at number 2, number 3 India, and number 4 United Kingdom, number 5 Germany, number 6 Japan. Let's look at further statistics regarding this. At number 7 Indonesia, number 8 Brazil, number 9 Canada, number 10 France, number 11 Mexico, no African country in the top 15. Meanwhile, India stands out as the only country to appear in both a top 10 list, ranking third in total GDP, added $2.1 trillion, while also placing in the top 10 for percentage growth. Talking about the top 10 drive 2/3 of global expansion. Beyond China, the US and India other major contributors include the United Kingdom, Germany, Japan, Indonesia, Brazil, and Canada. Collectively, the top 10 countries account for 66.5% of all projected GDP added globally through 2030. Fastest growth comes from smaller economies. While the largest economies dominate in absolute dollar gains, the fastest percentage growth is projected to come from much smaller markets. And now to supercomputers. Let's look at a top 15 countries with the most supercomputers. Computers are used for everything from weather forecasting and high-powered simulation to artificial intelligence and defense. The number of supercomputers a country has gives indication of the technological and economic positioning, and how they prioritize frontier research. The graphic we're about to see ranks the countries with the most supercomputers, and the data comes from top 500 and November 2025 list. Which countries have the most supercomputers? The United States of America, the birthplace of supercomputers, dominate the list at 171. The figure is 4 times higher than the number of supercomputers Japan has, which comes in second at 43. The data shows the number of supercomputers per country as of November 2025. As we can see, the United States topping the list, Japan at number 2, Germany at number 3 with 40, China 40, number 4, France number 5, and on, Canada, Italy, South Korea, Taiwan. China and Germany trail closely, tied in third and fourth place at 40 supercomputers. The ranking is significantly top-heavy, as the top 3 countries have more supercomputers than all the other 43 countries combined. In total, 26 countries have 5 or fewer supercomputers each, while 11 have just one supercomputer. It is not necessarily smaller countries that have fewer computers. Singapore, for example, has the same number as Russia and India at 5. The Singaporean government recently launched a supercomputing hub as it looks to become Southeast Asia's AI leader, increasing AI-driven supercomputer demand. Demand for supercomputers is increasing alongside AI, which requires massive computational power to be trained and run, which far surpass what regular computers are capable of. There are different types of supercomputers, but generally, they can crunch vast and complex datasets at speed, far surpassing humanity capabilities by outputting useful information. Supercomputers are used to make decisions across health, climate, and material science, which is why they are tipped to hold a key to some of society's greatest challenges. Nordic countries actually share access to their supercomputers in efforts to enable excellence and contribute towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The Finland-based Lumi supercomputer, the 9th most powerful in the world, was set up specifically with this in mind. It is hosted by a consortium of 10 countries, including the Nordics and their neighbor Estonia, to share resources and increase researcher access to some of the world's most powerful computers. The EU-funded RACE Center was set to develop novel AI technologies that can run effectively on supercomputers, while the US is ramping up participation and partnership with AI companies to stack its national lab with powerful computer clusters. And now to fast cars, where China's EVs are selling the most worldwide. While China dominates domestic electric vehicle production, its brands are increasingly visible in showrooms across Europe, Asia, and Latin America, but have minimal presence in the United States. This data here shows the share of battery electric vehicles, BEVs, sold in selected countries that were made in China from 2018 to 2025. The data for this graphic comes from Benchmark Mineral Intelligence. The figures include battery electric vehicles only, excluding hybrids. Mexico and Indonesia, breakout markets there. Mexico has quickly become one of the strongest overseas markets for Chinese EVs. In 2025, 89.9% of all BEVs are sold in Mexico were made in China, up sharply from 28.3% in 2023. In volume terms, Chinese-made EV sales surged from 3,145 units in 2023 to 53,742 in 2025. And now let's look at the chart on where Chinese EVs, electric vehicles, are selling the most worldwide. The chart. Well, at number 1, a Chinese vehicle from 2018 and the structure that comes with it spanning through the years to 2025. Indonesia has shown a similar trajectory. Chinese BEVs accounted for just 3.2% of sales in 2023, but that figure jumped to 61.6% by 2025. Sales volume climbed from 543 vehicles to 64,252 over the same period, underscoring how quickly Chinese brands have scaled in emerging markets. Strong foothold in Europe and Asia Pacific for Chinese vehicles. In the UK, Chinese-made BEVs represented 26% of total EV sales in 2025, totaling 129,069 vehicles. Several European markets, including Spain at 35.9%, Portugal 30.8% and Italy 37%, also show meaningful penetration. Australia stands out even more, with Chinese brands accounting for 79.5% of BEV sales in 2025, New Zealand 70.5% and Israel 84.8% also report high shares. The US remains an outlier in this case. Despite China's dominance in global EV manufacturing, the US market remains largely close to Chinese-made BEVs. In 2025, they accounted for just 0.5% of American EV sales, or 6,070 vehicles. Now looking at the chart indicating countries' electric vehicle and their sales volume, as you can see. Well, the chart's number, we're looking at number 7. Let's start from number 1. Well, at number 1, it's China, and the volume that has been sold, massive volumes, about 7,968,936 sales in 2025. In the UK, 129,069 vehicles sold by UK, electric vehicles sold by UK. Germany selling 87,650, Australia selling 82,147, and we're talking about South Korea 66,783 and Indonesia 64,252. Well, number 7, Mexico in that regard. Number 8, Israel, and on, France, Spain, Norway, Italy, Netherlands. And now we'll go on a quick break, and when we're back, we'll look at further conversation around world economies, in particular, a projection, according to reports, where food inflation will hit highest in 2026. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. It's your World Economy. My name is Blyden Okem. Continuation of a discussion around world economy, we'll be looking at where food inflation will hit highest in 2026. Food prices remain one of the most persistent cost pressures for households worldwide. In 2026, grocery bills are projected to rise sharply in some countries, while remaining relatively stable in others. According to new forecast from the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, food inflation will vary dramatically across 160 countries in 2026, ranging from double-digit surges in some economies to outright price declines in others. The map we're showing ranks 160 countries by their projected year-over-year change in food prices, highlighting where households are likely to face the steepest increases in 2026. The country is facing the steepest food price increases. Today, inflation pressures remain strongest in emerging and import-dependent countries. Food inflation is influenced by currency movement, commodity prices, trade disruption, and domestic supply conditions. Countries experiencing currency depreciation or ongoing economic instability tend to see sharper increases in food costs. And now let's look at the chart indicating where food inflation will hit hardest in 2026. According to the chart, at number 1 is Iran, but there seems to be a war at the moment. Food inflation is expected to go as far as 55.9%, and Argentina at number 2 at 33.2%, Turkey at number 3 25.1%, Haiti at 24.1%, number 5 Malawi 21.2%, number 6 Nigeria 17.1%. Let's look at further standings in this. Number 7 Lebanon, number 8 Angola, number 9 Kazakhstan, number 10 Zambia, number 11 Ethiopia, and number 12 Jamaica and Mongolia, as well as number 14 Kyrgyzstan. At the top of the ranking, Iran, food prices are forecast to rise 55.9%, as we said. Iran's currency depreciation and prolonged inflationary pressures have already pushed food inflation to extreme levels in recent years. Come now. Exciting times ahead when it has to do with world economy. Finally, in world economy, one buyer dominates Iran's oil exports. Let's talk about it. Back to the oil sector. Iran has long faced international sanctions over its nuclear program. Under President Trump, the U.S. intensified pressure by imposing a broad trading ban and targeting foreign financial institutions that did business with primary energy partner. Syria was the only other country to surpass $1 billion in purchases, importing roughly $1.2 billion worth of oil in 2024, or 3.3% of total exports. The United Arab Emirates and Venezuela followed at 2% and 1.2% respectively. In Venezuela's case, energy trade has included an agreement to swap Venezuelan oil for Iranian condensate amid both countries facing U.S. sanctions. Iran sells its oil cheap. The list of countries that Iran sells to has shrunk in recent years as sanctions reshaped trade flows. In 2010, Iran oil landed in the ports of more than 20 countries including China, Japan, India, South Korea, and several European nations. Sanctions did not hold exports entirely, but they redirected them towards a far smaller group of buyers. Today, Iran relies on a shadow fleet of reflag tankers and ship-to-ship transfers to obscure cargo origin and bypass restriction. A price is another incentive. Iranian crude typically trades at about $3 to $9 per barrel discount to Brent. Its oil is relatively cheap to extract, costing as little as $10 per barrel, compared with Brent prices around $60. That discount is estimated to cost Tehran several billions of dollars per year in foregone revenue, effectively the price of maintaining a limited customer base. Well, the war has played some critical role when it has to do with the oil sector, and we're understanding the drive for Iranian crude oil and how much it gets to cost as cheap as $3 to $10 compared to the likes of Brent, which is Nigeria's price benchmark, hitting $68 per barrel. This is the much we can take when it has to do with world economy and the direction that comes with it and the statistics and all of it. And here we draw the curtain on today's edition of World Economy. Thank you for being a part of it. My name is Blyden Lukem, and thank you for watching.